Hi, it's Karen here, Karen Sanders from the HR department. I hope you're all well. I hope you've all had a nice weekend, as nice as it can be at the moment. You've managed to get out into your gardens, enjoy the sun, do your one daily piece of exercise, and are starting to adjust to the change that we're all experiencing. Children are now on school holidays, so hopefully that takes a bit of pressure as we go into the next week. So as has happened now the last few weeks, government are updating guidelines, it would seem, very late on a Friday night. So that gives us some work to do over the weekend. But the good news is it gives us a chance over the weekend to have a look at the guidelines that have been updated on the job retention scheme, work our way through them and summarise them for you, our wonderful clients. So I thought that I would just do a recorded PowerPoint and to see if this was a good way of communicating to you. If you found this useful, I'd really appreciate your feedback, because when there's additional updates, I'll look to do the same. Right, so we had the updates over this weekend, which has brought additional clarity and some much longed for answers to some unanswered questions. Let's have a look at what they are. Just for clarification, there are some additions in here to the guidelines, but on eligibility. So any employee on the payroll on the 28th of February and paid by PAYE is eligible for the job retention scheme and furlough payments. That does include all salaried directors, but just to remind you that if you pay yourselves by part salary and dividends, it's just a salary element. So probably for most of you, that's a very minimal payment. So you can furlough yourself. Now, just remember that the guidelines are very clear that you must not do work for your business whilst you're on furlough. However, for directors, they have said that you can do statutory duties only. Now, I really want you to think about that before you decide to furlough yourselves, because doing statutory duties only is such a small amount that you can actually do for your business, and actually none of which will generate revenue for your company. So if you really feel that you're best placed to furlough yourselves, you can do, but really try and think about, if you spent your time working in the business, looking forward, marketing, generating sales, would that add more revenue to your business than the furlough payment itself? You'll know that and you'll do the right thing. It does include agency workers, and also the guidelines now do explicitly say nannies and cleaners. Now, the reason that appears is because a lot of people will have a nanny or a cleaner at home, and so long as they are paid through a payroll, PAYE, then yes, they are eligible to be furloughed as well. Apprentices are also included now in the guidelines. So obviously, if apprentices can be furloughed in terms of they then don't do any work, but what is good is they can keep on the training element, and there's been some additions to the guidelines in respect to training a bit later. So that's good. Apprentices can be furloughed but continue the training element of their apprenticeship. Also includes salaried partners of LLPs and those on fixed term contracts. We expected that, but it wasn't explicitly clear in the previous guidelines. So working, we have a bit more clarity on this, as has been in the guidelines right from day one. An employee cannot work for you as their employer whilst they're on furlough. What wasn't clear though is about whether they could work for another employer. And in fact, I don't think there are many people in the legal profession that expected that they could work for another employer whilst on furlough. However, the new guidelines say that they can work for another employer whilst they're employed by you and on furlough. So yes, what that means is they will receive 80% of their pay that they receive with you, and they can also receive payment from another employer. Quite surprising really, So quite possible that an employee could maybe receive 180% of their pay. But anyway, that is now what the guidelines say. What I would urge you to do though is have a look at your contract employment. So what this means is they can work for another employer whilst on furlough if the contract employment allows. So some of you might have a clause in your contract that states that they can work for another employer by agreement with you. And it will probably be things like, so long as it doesn't there's no conflict of interest. So check that first. And then the other thing, when you're confirming to your employees that they can work elsewhere, I would also say that they need to ensure that their new job is at different working hours to the job that they have with you. Because if you decide to take them off furlough, you don't want them to be, they can't physically work for two employers at the same time. That isn't explicitly clear in the guidelines, but from my mind, that is what I would look to do. Because remember, whilst they're on furlough, they should be available to work for you at any time if you take them off furlough. The other thing which has been updated, which is really good, is that training can be undertaken and is encouraged. So previous guidelines said that they could undertake training, but it almost felt like we weren't quite sure how much training that they could do. So it's actually actively encouraged, which is really good. So why not make the most of this time? Give your employees a training program. There's loads and loads of free online courses. Have a look and see what you can get your team onto. What you do just have to be aware of is the amount of training they're doing with, and the number of hours, is that they don't fall beneath the national minimum wage. And if they do, you'll then have to top their salary up. But yeah, put a training plan together, work through that training plan with your employee and give them some additional skills so that when you all come back to work, you know, they're more skilled. Why not? I think the government have done this largely because lots of employers have wanted clarity on it, but actually it's really good for mental health and well-being for your team to be doing something whilst they're on furlough. I'm definitely seeing that those on furlough, particularly if they live on their own or maybe they don't have children, keeping them fully entertained, is that doing some training, doing some kind of work is really, really good for their mental health. Rotational furlough, we have been advising over the last week that to clients that you could rotate employees whilst they're on furlough, but it wasn't explicitly detailed in the guidelines. It is now explicitly detailed within the guidelines that you can rotate people while they're on furlough. So the minimum requirement is that somebody you place on furlough is furloughed for 3 weeks minimum, and you can furlough them as many times as you like. So what that does mean is you could rotate 2 employees in and out of furlough. So if you've got 2 people doing the same job, probably only both of them 50% capacity, then what you could do is furlough one of them for 3 weeks and have the other one working for 3 weeks, and then the following 3 weeks alternate them. That would be a good thing to do if you can do that. Okay, on to the agreements. The good news is that the furlough agreement for you to make sure you are receiving back from your employees can be retrospective. So if you place somebody on furlough leave with effect from the 1st of April and you only issued their agreement on Friday, then actually the agreement can be backdated and retrospective to the 1st of April. The key thing here is that the furlough commences from the date at which the employee stopped working. So it's not from the date at which you made the decision, it's not from the date at which you actually issued the agreement, it's actually the date that the furlough started, so the day at which they stopped working. The agreements must be in writing. You've all had agreements from us. If you haven't yet issued your agreements, let us know this week or let us know today. because we've got new furlough agreements that have been updated based on the updated guidelines. If you've already issued your agreements, you don't need to reissue them. They're absolutely fine. It's just as the guidelines are changing, then we're updating the agreements in line. But it doesn't matter if you've already issued previous agreements, they're absolutely sufficient. And then the other thing that has been confirmed is that the agreements must be kept and you must have a record of them for 5 years. We've had some questions around the fact that we need to have an agreement to them in writing. This agreement can just be an email response from the employee saying, I have received the agreement and I'm happy with it and I agree to it and I'm happy to go on to furlough. Okay, we've had some clarification on pay now as well. The first one being that commission can be included in your furlough calculations, your 80%, if it is contractual. So if it's written into a contract, commission payments can be included. If it's non-contractual, they won't. Pay excludes non-monetary benefits. It also excludes tips. And another really good point is that it's whatever the individual's salary was as at the 28th of February 2020. And the reason that's a good thing is before the job retention scheme came out, many employers were making decisions on how to reduce overheads, and they looked at and introduced reducing pay for some individuals, if not all of them, or moving on to short-term working. So if you made those decisions in early March, or maybe late March, then that actually doesn't affect the 80% calculation, because the 80% is calculated on the salary as at the 28th of February 2020. Just as a curious side note, I think the government forgot it was a leap year this year, seemed to have forgotten that 29th of February has existed. So yeah, anyway, that's salary. Can reverse the salary sacrifice, and student loans and apprenticeship levy must be deducted as well. Okay, nearly there now. Just a few other bits and bobs that don't fit under any of the other headings. First one is to confirm that you can't use the grant to replace redundancy payments. Now, none of our clients will have done that, I'm sure, and it's certainly something we would never have advised you to do. It's actually just a shame it's even appeared in the guidelines, because it means that companies have been doing this. But no, for clarity, you can't use the grant to replace redundancy payments. You can now, it has been confirmed in the guidelines, furlough employees with caring responsibilities. So we have over the last week advised employers that we don't believe selecting staff to furlough because they have childcare responsibilities, as an example, would be discriminatory. And so it's lovely to see that this has been updated in the guidelines. So if you know you've got staff who might be struggling because they're trying to work a full-time job and homeschool and look after 2 children all at the same time, and is really struggling with that, you can actually use this as a basis to furlough employees. You can now organise volunteering opportunities. What this means is volunteering opportunities outside of your organisation. There is still some lack of clarity of volunteering within your own organisation. So last week, the guidelines stated that employees could do training and volunteering for your organisation, so long as they don't bring revenue into the business or provide services too. They've clarified the training element, but still haven't clarified the volunteering. So if you have some employees off their own back who decide just to do some volunteering, as long as it doesn't bring revenue into the business or provide services too, it is still allowable. Hopefully though, by next week, we might have a bit more clarity around what that might be. Okay, so this wonderful portal that we're all holding on to so that we can receive our furlough reimbursements back into the business. The guidelines have been updated to say that it will be available from the end of April. So it's still unclear when the monies will be received. I'm slightly worried that, being that it now says from end of, it might not quite be ready, but that's just my own hesitation. Hopefully, let's try and be positive. The portal will be ready by the end of April, and hopefully we will receive monies back into our bank a few days after our submissions. But perhaps the best thing with this, speak to your accountant. I'm sure as soon as that becomes available, they will know. But we'll keep close to this, and as soon as we know, we'll let you know as well. The guidelines are still silent on holidays during furlough, which is a shame. Again, hopefully, and there'll be another update Friday night, and the situation on holidays might become clearer too. Our current position on holidays is that staff can't take holiday while they're on furlough, so we've been recommending for you to ask your employees to take holiday before they're furloughed. You can even force them to take holiday so long as you're giving them the required notice of the holiday, or to have 3 weeks on furlough, come off furlough and take holiday. Holiday is also expected to be at 100%, not at the 80%. But there will be loads that government are trying to work through in terms of holidays. So I really, really do expect that this will be clarified. So that's it. That's the update from us. If you've got any questions about any parts of the update of this presentation, please call the office or email the team. Still on the same number, still on the same email address. We're all working from home, but we think we've got a good system for responding to you all. So I really hope you all have a good week. Keep safe, and I really, really hope that you're all keeping healthy as well. Thank you.